I'm Dasychira, and this is my portal.
Hi guys, welcome to this discussion with Dasychira. We are going to be exploring the portal that's being created. We're going to be exploring this incredible video, Eternal Family, and generally picking some brains here. So welcome.
So lovely to be here.
So lovely to have you. So I'm going to hit you with one sentence to describe yourself as an artist.
That is such a good question, and it's a lot to encapsulate in one question. But I guess because I want to create work that sort of exists in itself outside of a realm of our understanding, it comes from a realm from outside of our understanding. So in one sentence, I'd say I'm like a synesthesiatist. Like, I guess my way of thinking creatively is very visual minded, even though like I make music mostly. So I like cross-referencing like different senses and sensibility and combining that into a new experience, you know, because for me, making art is really like a process of unlocking something from like a plane of the unknown or like the psychic realm,
Yeah.
I like to call it. So yeah, I'd say like a synesthesiatist, if that is a term.
I think it's a term now.
Yeah,
No, so like I see a lot of things expanding. I think that's what I noticed. It's never like you're being closed in, it's that you're being opened up in some way, which I
yes.
found really interesting. I think sometimes when we think about portal, we think about, okay, the door's going to slam and we're going to be trapped in this new place, if you know what I mean. But there's all of this openness, even within the dark, that I find really interesting. So do you find comfort within darkness per se, would you say?
I do. I think for multiple reasons. I try not to stay too laser focused on darkness itself because like I find that that cycle can really just take you further into darkness and you end up in a place where you can't really see what you're doing. But I think what I really appreciate about darkness itself is that in the darkness you really value what light is. Like you can really see the light, you can really feel the light.
Right.
And a close friend of mine, actually one of the directors of the video, um, on a previous video that we did together, told me like while we were on the beach filming, always follow the light, like always move toward the light. That is your path forward. And ever since that day, we shot on the beach in Malibu. It was a super beautiful day. Um, I just realized that the reason I like the darkness so much is because I love the light so much. So, you know, I feel like it's one thing to appreciate the other. But yeah, that being said, I'm very fascinated with like the macabre.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I was literally itching to ask you about your cultural influence because it feels so rich and layered in a
Yeah.
sense. So, is there somewhere that you draw from or something that you grew up reading about, let's say in a picture book, and you're like, that, I want that?
Yeah, definitely. I guess like there's a lot to do with nature as
Right.
well. A lot to do with specifically like insects. I feel like I've always been like really interested in the lives of insects and like also like what their world must be like, their perspective and like how I guess everything, I feel as if everything is connected and like in terms of like society the way it is now, like we've been taught as humans or like, you know, it's sort of been emphasized in society that humans are kind of like the dominant species on the planet, so to
Mhm.
speak. But I've always felt like, you know, other species are equally as important. You know, they just don't
Yeah.
have like such big egos like we do.
Mhm.
So you know, I've always thought about like what the perspective is of other beings and like this sort of like transhumanism. So yeah, I think from an early age I was drawn to like insects and like kind of the way they think and the way they perceive. And that also has to do with this like sort of synesthesia that I'm after.
Right. And
So,
would you
yeah, a lot of
say,
encyclopedia and stuff like that.
no, that's really interesting to me. I was just wondering, would you say that their kind of sensory perception is heightened as opposed to ours, or how do you feel like they perceive?
That's a good question. Yeah, I feel like it's like a counter sort of balance or like it's a different balance for species to species. I mean, I think, for example, like a praying mantis is very in tune with its surroundings, like with its like with its like head, you know, and like with its movements, it's like picking up like vibrations in the air through its like antennae and things like that. And yeah, I like that it can sort of smell things without smelling things, you know, like the way that we would. there's that level of perception that I'm especially fascinated by. It's like they can still sort of interpret similar things to us, but like their mechanism and means of doing so is like so different.
And is there like a way that we can mimic that, or as humans, I guess, reach that level of kind of sensitivity to the elements, do you feel?
Yeah, I think that it's a matter of like being really in tune with your environment. I think like it goes sort of beyond like also what we can control. Like
Yeah.
if I could turn on creativity like a tap, you know, I would all the time. I would just leave
Like
the water. The magic of that is, you know, it only comes to us in like certain moments in certain settings where we're especially like in tune with things. You know, for me, as I said earlier, like I'm really like a big admirer of nature and the natural world. So I find myself when I'm near nature or near the beach, especially near the ocean, I'm more in tune with these things. I guess it's because our surroundings are like all that more immediate. So for me, it's like being in a space where you can really hear the sound of your own thoughts. You can really allow yourself to become one with the environment around you, because I feel as though, you know, sort of subjective experience like separates us from the natural world and like things around
right.
us and the people around us as well. So once that kind of like melts away and dissipates, then I feel like it's possible. Yeah.
No, I find that so fascinating. I think what's interesting is your stimulus comes from something so kind of untainted, not manipulated, just nature in its essence. And what we're seeing here is like a lot of visual effects and special effects and whatnot. Are you trying to kind of bring the magic of nature into, I guess, into your how to say, your artwork, but you feel as though you have to use the special effects to bring that forward, because we might have destroyed the world slightly, or we might have tainted the this, that was the kind of tangent I was going off, where we have to recreate the splendor of nature to make up for what's actually happened in some way.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty spot on. I guess like because the natural world is so mysterious, I mean, like even with all of the scientific developments and enhancements we've made as like a society, there's still things we don't understand. We still don't know exactly how the Big Bang happened. We still don't know everything about the ocean.
Right.
There's still undiscovered species. We still can't explain paranormal phenomena through science, even though there is sort of this like pseudoscience of like companies that make, for example, EVP readers that can like pick up on like ghost activity and things like that. Like there's a sort of in between like nature and spirituality and technology.
Yeah.
Like I feel like, you know, on one hand, we can say like we understand the natural world through like science and study, but on the other hand, there are just things that like can't be explained.
Right.
Um, so for me, like my practice is really sort of finding that in between and like connecting the two. It's like, you know, if I could somehow prove, I mean, like I believe that ghosts exist, for example,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no objective like scientific evidence that proves that. So for me, that's a lot of fun. Like through my practice, it's like, how can I use technology? How can I capture the sort of essence of the natural world and the inexplicable,
Mm-hmm.
and use tools that I have to sort of create or document the existence of these like supernatural things that, you
Uh-huh.
know, I think a lot of people experience on a subjective basis, but you can't really say objectively like in any sort of like subjective scientific study that it's real. So for me, that's like where a lot of the fun is like sort of taking that essence of the unknown through nature and then through my practice. And with technology especially, I feel it's a really effective way to recreate some of those sensations. You know,
Right.
even like the way that I'm speaking to you now, it's like using this filter and like I'm appearing to you as like a phantom and I'm flying into this like debug box that my friend made in 3D. It's like, you know, I feel like it's like we're taking this sort of, we're emulating
Yeah.
the this like sort of unknown magic that already exists. So yeah, for me, it's like I can't really say that like I can shape it myself, but I can at least recreate it and bring my sort of like imagination of it to life.
Yeah, I was just getting mesmerized. Like when you're talking to me, I'm like, focus, because I feel
Yeah.
like I'm watching like a whole art film in its own, I guess, yeah, in its own way. But I think what I'm really interested in is when we touch on supernatural and stuff, I'm sure you've had it too, where people just straight away, nah, doesn't exist, bullshit. And I'm just thinking, does it matter that people don't believe us? To what degree or to what extent does it matter? And also, is there a way, I mean, in using high tech, do we kind of form more agency? Do we become more legitimate, if you know what I mean? Because when it becomes, I think, more advanced, people might have less space to go, oh, it's BS, because it just appears so complicated and alienating.
Right.
I don't know,
Yeah.
few questions in one there, but what do you kind of feel on that?
I'd say, like, in general, it doesn't really matter what people think.
Yeah.
Because we can't really change the thoughts of others, and we also can't convince people of things that are literal truths. For example, people who are flat earthers, they can like look at Google Maps, they can look at Google Earth, they can read 100 books, like read the works of Copernicus, and they'll still say, oh, the Earth is flat. So there's just some people out there who like cannot be convinced. I
Right.
think you know, I don't want to put my views onto other people, especially when it comes to spiritual things, because I feel like that is such a personal thing. But I'd say, if I experience some sort of enlightenment or transcendence or, epiphany, I would want to share that with people, especially with people in, my sort of music or art community, or, queer people in the queer community, or, like if I feel like if I have something to share with like sort of my chosen family, if you will, I will make an effort to sincerely show them, to illustrate, this is a magic or a power that we can harness. And it's something that we can be in touch with that, sort of transcends what our idea is of daily life and daily existence. So I definitely will make a sincere attempt to show my community and also the world, like sort of uh, what it is that we can be in tune with, that I feel like I understand. And if people don't want to be convinced, like too bad for them. I feel like they're missing out. But also in terms of like, complexities, uh, I'd say, my work definitely isn't like an easy sort of like thing to digest, and it's intentionally so. I mean, because I'm trying to unpack things that I myself don't fully understand, and that's sort of the beauty of it. It's like I'm exploring. So I think it takes, sort of patient listener, or someone who really like can patiently appreciate and unpack and unravel things, to sort of stay on the same wavelength with me. And I think a lot of magical stuff is like that. I mean, for example, the study of the universe, that's something that I definitely don't understand fully. I mean, I've read like a fair amount of books on it. I've done like astronomy courses, and like that's definitely a complicated science in itself, if you look at like the sort of physics and mathematics behind like black holes, for example. I mean, it's still very interesting. I can't say it's like fully within my comprehension, but it's still very interesting and something that I want to spend time to get to know. So I feel like for a lot of things that are truly worth it, they are somewhat complicated, and they do require sort of like a patience, and also, even more than patience, I think faith and a belief. For example, believing that ghosts exist, believing magic exists, believing aliens exist. There's a lot of so-called evidence, out there to prove that it isn't. So, it takes a lot of faith to I think, believe in magic. So
100%. And I think what's really interesting, as you were saying that, I was thinking about this psychic that I know, and she always just brazenly says, the mystery is not your business. It's not your business. Why are you not enjoying? Why are you not leaning into all this stimulus without trying to kind of pick it apart or find reason? Because I think when we find reason, sometimes we take away from all of the magic.
Yeah, that's really true. I think it's like this impulse of like the human psychology and the mind to sort of prove that things are what we perceive they are, and I think that does create a sort of like limitation when like you believe in something and it's so meaningful and precious to you, but you can't really say what it is. That shouldn't take away from you like really getting something out of it, especially if it's so life-changing and larger than life and larger than comprehension, because at the end of the day, like, humans don't understand everything.
No,
And
not at all.
anyone who says they do, I think they just have like some sort of like, I don't know, like psychotic frame of view.
The ego's loud, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And I just feel like the moments where I've experienced like transcendence the most is like sort of in what I would describe as like an ego death. And that is sort of like letting yourself become one with everything, like you and your experience and what you see and you're perceiving is connected. Like the whole world around you and yourself is connected. So I think rather than trying to like say or judge that things are a certain way, I try to look of it through this lens of like, well, this is like what's in my conscious reality, and it's a sort of like collective consciousness, and I'm just going to let myself become one with it, and rather listen instead of talk about it, so that I can really understand it more.
I love that. I'm just getting this feeling when you're saying that. I feel like technology is a vessel in some way, is what
Yeah.
I'm feeling here. That is literally the feeling. And I think it's very interesting with the casting of the people in the white. Maybe you could kind of tell me about how they kind of interact, how they resonate with the works, and how they experience your vision.
Yeah, that was such a wonderful like manifestation of a dream, like to have them act in the video. The way it happened was well, last year actually, I think it was around this time, I connected like sort of randomly with someone on Instagram who like shared a song from my last album called Extreme. They shared this video of these crows like sort of like flying around in the sky, and I DM'd them. It was like during quarantine, like in LA. I DM'd them saying, "Oh my gosh, this is literally what it feels like to be in LA right now. Just like sitting inside, the sky is like bright blue, but there's like these crows flying around. It's like super weird." And then they like just wrote me back, and we're having this like friendly conversation. And then I start to realize, oh, they're a filmmaker. Like this person I'm talking to is an artist. They're creative. I'm curious like what they do. And I checked out their work, and I was like, super in this sort of like Hollywood zone. I was staying at my friend Guille's apartment, who's also one of the directors of the video, in Hollywood. And I was just really feeling like life is a movie and everything around me is like this movie. And I really want to just capture it. So I started speaking to this person on Instagram who goes by like Final Garden on Instagram. And I realized his name's Charlie. He's a filmmaker. And I was just really excited to collaborate with people, especially in LA,
Right.
because I feel like it's just such a haunted place in general, and it's so interesting.
So
So, we were kind of like talking about what interests us in terms of video and film. I had been watching a lot of these like YouTube channels, like where, people go ghost hunting, or they do these like rituals, like
I
where
love
they play
those.
the night game, or, you've probably seen some of them too. There's just like super corny, like usually like these
I love
bros.
the way they cut, and like it's just so extra every time.
Extra, and the whole like, what's up guys? Like, welcome back to our channel thing. That definitely like inspired like the format of the video. So yeah, we were kind of like watching a lot of these like YouTube videos and sharing links,
Yeah.
and we decided like, what if we create our own sort of like fictional YouTube channel where it's like a bunch of friends who are like getting together, just like another night, and they're gonna do a ritual and something's gonna happen. So that was like sort of like the starting point, and we came up with the script and everything. We workshopped the idea a lot more. But I actually had to leave LA because of quarantine. It was just getting so hectic out there. So I relocated, and then, most of the input that I had was remote after that point. But we came up with a script and everything. And then Charlie, who has like done some casting for films before, literally just went on a casting website and found like 20 people. And then they went and showed up to the auditions, and Charlie and the other director Guille ended up picking their like favorite.
Yeah.
And the people they selected, the actors they selected, are just so amazing.
It
Like
just
they're
couldn't have been more perfect. It was just so
perfect.
eerie.
Yeah. No,
Loved
it's so strange, this manifestation, because it felt like almost like that was meant to happen in a way. Like our idea, the story, the setting, the characters, like it all fits like so well. It's uncanny.
it was
So
strange
yeah.
to me because I thought, wow, this is so interesting. But I think what struck me is these women were so, either they're just good actresses, but I don't think that's the case. They just seemed so involved and so connected with this
I
kind of
I feel like they're like that. Like that's just like how they are. Like
that's what I mean.
real,
It's just
yeah,
you can watch things and you can be like, oh, very good actress, actor, you know.
yeah,
But then you're like, no, this person literally looks as though they're channeling. Like they're so immersed. And I was like, ooh. That's
yeah,
so
absolutely.
cool.
Apparently they were like a lot of fun to be around, like on set. Like their energy was just like super like curious. They all had really good senses of humor. They were
Yeah.
all really like interested in the box that we ordered from eBay and stuff like that. And yeah, they were just so involved. You know, it really felt like, and it's similar for me as well. Like when I'm engaged in my artistic practice, like I feel like I'm just really being my true self. Or even when I'm performing, I feel like, you know, a lot of people have this idea performers are wearing a mask. But for me,
Yeah.
it's like that's when I take the mask off. And I
Right.
felt like for the women in the video, like they just took their masks off. Like that's how they are, you know, and it really fit with the sort of like idea of a so-called like candid, like, you know, YouTube video, a fictional candid YouTube
That's what
video.
I mean. I was just gonna say these women, like I think watching the video back, this might evoke things for them in some way, or they
Yeah,
might formulate their own experiences, or even like to the point of kind of astral projections or lucid dreams surrounding what they've been so immersed in. I think
yeah,
the
absolutely.
follow-up to that video would be so interesting to find out how people are kind of living since being in that.
I would love to do a chapter 2. Like, what is this utopia like inside the box? And
Yeah.
that's also like sort of the great question, you know, because the video was also partially inspired by this cult in California called Heaven's Gate. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
No, but I love cult stuff, so
Oh my gosh, well, definitely look into that. But there were a group of people who believed that one day aliens were going to come down from the sky and tell them to get in their UFO and then fly away into heaven. And they were literally like backpacking, like living out of a suitcase in the US, traveling for years, like decades. And eventually there was this comet that was going to arrive in the 90s called Hale Bopp. And they decided, you know, with this comet, it just feels like this is the time that we're going to solidify our destiny of meeting these aliens. And they like rented a mansion in, I think it was San Diego. And they committed this like one of the biggest mass suicides of all time. So they could intentionally, like when the comet was like sort of flying over where they were, meet these aliens and like go to heaven. So like that was like sort of the inspiration for this video as well. It's like sort of this cult, this group of people, they're like a family in a way. Like they know that life isn't forever and they want to sort of like solidify their destiny in some shape or form. So they decide like this ritual is the perfect way for them to be together forever. And that's kind of like how they align.
see, I find that so interesting. Obviously, in real practice, that is a really morbid story.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
However,
So morbid.
it's I think it's interesting how much trust people would have put in the supernatural or in the, I guess, the mystery to even go through with that. And I think with that
Yeah.
trust, I guess it comes with I guess some kind of responsibility for there to be something there after that great sacrifice. And I think that what you might have done with your work per se is to really show us what it can be, what it could be, what, you know what I mean, like the potential. Because I think it would
Mm.
suck to go through all of that for there to just be nothing, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. I mean, we don't really know for sure, you know, like what's going to happen on the other side. Like our being, like right now in this lifetime, is a projection of our consciousness. Like whatever we experience, feel, think about is like so generated by the fact that we are a consciousness.
Mhm.
And I think, you know, after life ends, I think the consciousness also ends because it's this
Yeah.
idea of like being. I don't think energy goes away. Like I think energy is kind of forever and that energy will always like pass through the passages of time. But yeah, I think this idea of consciousness is just very much something that is lost. So
Mhm.
yeah, I was like thinking about it and thinking about like what these people like really thought was going to happen on the other side, or like what they're like trying to prove. And I think, yeah, what you said is really amazing, like that they believed so much that like on the other side there's going to be this experience that they're going to have. And you know, I think that also brings a lot of people comfort. I think
Oh,
that a lot of people are afraid of dying, and they're afraid of losing their consciousness. And this idea of a UFO, or, you know, like a sort of heaven that people can go to and be with their loved ones, helps them get through daily life. So that's also something that is a positive, I think, in all of this, even though, yeah, it is quite, in reality, it is quite macabre. But
Yeah.
I think really, like, they were happy.
I
And that's
think
also something I wanted to, like, sort of hone in on and zoom in, was that, you know, they were living the life they wanted to live. And that's precious.
I agree. I like that. Oh, it's precious. But
Definitely.
sorry, I'm cancer rising. But anyway, the point is, I think when we hear about something other or something after per se, it's always got to be so decadent or so emotively stimulating. Otherwise, people don't want to go there. Otherwise, there is no point, if that makes sense. So
Right.
I think the only thing that might stand between, I guess, the belief and like bleak nihilism is how we construct the kind of alluring come, like there's going to be this and there's going to be that. And I think it's really interesting to see what your this and that is in a way,
Yeah,
how
exactly.
it would
And it's all
differ.
fantasy. It's all a projection of fantasy. And I think that's really like the magic. One of the biggest magics of being alive is the fact that we have imaginations. You
Mhm.
know, I mean, despite the fact, you know, there's ego and there's all this stuff about the human experience, like, we can still like have these experiences like lucid dreams or astral projection, or we can really use the power of our mind to bring the immaterial or the imagined into physical reality. And
Right.
I think in that, you know, there's just endless potential.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I think there's something super exciting and there's also something super dangerous about the way we kind of construct this. I guess the dangerous side would be like people completely jumping off the face of the earth to go there quicker. And
Yeah, I know that's psycho, but yeah, it's definitely a real thing.
right, because I think I might be paraphrasing, but Marx called, you know, religion like the opiate of the people. So in a way it would kind of drug or pull people into this kind of like scary reverie where they don't really know what they're doing, but they're following it.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
think
Like the blind leading the blind, kind of.
that's what I mean. There's like there
Yeah.
is a danger when we kind of address the supernatural in that sense. But I think if you address it in the sense of this is what could be speculated realities, then I feel like we're in better territory personally.
Exactly. Yeah, and that kind of harkens back to like what we were talking about earlier, and just that, like, you know, none of us can really say like this is the truth, like,
Yeah.
because it's all like our projection of our consciousness. We can't say like one thing is like the absolute truth, because there's going to be endless other things that sort of like dispute that. So
Right.
I kind of see it in my perspective. Like, I like to think about, you know, the supernatural in a sort of playful way.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause it is something I think like one should take seriously, because I think energies are real. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, I, what I find like sort of entertaining and interesting about this whole like YouTube culture is that in a way they don't actually take it seriously when they're doing these rituals and like ghost hunting things, and they think it's like super funny, you know, like getting together with their friends, like
Yeah.
summon like a real demon. And then like these really intense, scary things start happening and they're not laughing anymore. But I find that funny. So like that's something that I like to sort of parody, or also like mirror in a way, is like sort of this like playfulness and this like curiosity and this like sense of humor, because I think it is real, but we don't fully understand it. So like that's like kind of what I want to tap into, is the fact that like we can do certain things that will have like a, you know, psychic effect, but we can't really say why.
Right. I find that really interesting also how the characters are in your work. I think some of us how would I say it? Sometimes I think the tale of spirit can become a bit of a threat. Like if you do this, or if you don't do this, or if you don't pass this down your family line, so and so is gonna ravage you. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah.
so I remember when I was a kid, I was at my friend's house, which was super, super haunted. Um,
Mm.
very, very old kind of Victorian house, and legend has it that people burnt in a fire within the house and there were children,
Oh,
and it was horrible basically. I can
thanks.
yeah, not great, but I think when my friend locked me in this room, like in the attic in the dark, my mind went to, oh shit, are these spirits going to like me? Have I rubbed them up the wrong way? Am I okay? So I think you're perceiving these spirits as, I guess in some way they felt a little bit playful to me with the kind of, the more it was interesting basically how they're not terrifying. They're different and they're other in their kind of surreal way, but it wasn't terrifying to me.
Totally. Yeah, because I think in a way, like the way I perceive a lot of like spirits and ghosts and like this idea of like haunted things is like that, you know, I don't think they really have any specific intentions most of the time.
Right.
Like if we come into contact with them, like I kind of believe like a lot of hauntings and ghosts and things like that are incidents or traumas that sort of happened that are repeating on like a loop, like sort of forever, because these things like they never got to have that closure, or they were never treated with love, or it was just like a mortifying sort of experience. And I think like I sort of like compare it more to like energies and stuff like that. Like, for example, you know, you can walk into a room or something, you can get a good energy, or you could be like, you know, something happened here. There's like not a good energy here. And I think that applies to, you know, sort of like, yeah, something happening, like someone like dying in a fire in this like old house, like that's sort of like maybe their pain or whatever energy they were feeling, somehow it never got to be free or it never got to rest. So now it's like constantly ravaging like through time. And I guess like when it comes to like sort of interacting with them, like I think fear is something that comes from us, like as like, you know, sort of like mortal alive beings, like we're the ones that are scared.
Looking back, it feels like a complete projection. And I think a lot of it is to do with what we've seen to do with spirits and how I guess Hollywood or mainstream media makes us terrified, or they're going to rip your skin off, they're going to this, they're going to that. But
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think like the truth is like we just never will know really like what their intentions are. And oftentimes like when we do make contact with them, it's like pretty weird. Like I've used a Ouija board like a handful of times. And most of the time I kind of just got like gibberish from it, you know, or like you sort of have like a conversation and then it starts like just like going no or yes or like just like XZ whatever. So you know, for me the fun is just like the fact that you can even have these experiences. Like when I was in California last year, I went to the ghost ship, which is the Queen Mary, in Long Beach, and that was one of the most amazing experiences I've had insofar as like haunted things go. And again, I was with my friend Guille, who's like my, you know, ghost hunter, like friend in crime. Like we're both we're just partners in this like sort of like I don't know if you'd call it experiment or just like this fascination, like where we really want to interact, we really want to like play, and that's also like our personality in general.
We all have one friend like that, and we drag them along, and then they have fun when they're there, but they're our experiment.
And that's like the most fun for me is like when I get to do like ghost stuff with my friends. Like that's the best.
Love that.
And at the Queen Mary, we played Bloody Mary. We did the Ouija board. We did it all at like 3:33 a.m. like on Friday the 13th, you know, and nothing happened.
Really you know what? I did that in front of a mirror in Hampton Court. So
I mean, oh yeah, I know where that is. I've been there before. It's got like the head maze in the back, right?
It's so spooky. Now
really spooky, right?
I thought I was being really clever. I was like, wow, I've seen this ghost going up and down this corridor. Legend has it Anne Boleyn walks up and down there. I was a major kind of like history buff, and I don't like what happened to them at all, bastard. But I find the tales so interesting, and I thought, oh, I've just seen something. And then I look up and there's a projector. And I'm like, oh, no way. Damn it. So I think it's interesting how we can think that we're having a supernatural experience. It's in fact fabricated in some way. Or
in a sense it is. And I think that like things come to us in like forms that we like don't expect that they do. Like, I mean, for me, like this sort of like experience of seeing a ghost, it's like usually pretty subjective. Like your subjective singular experience of something paranormal is hard to convey to someone who like wasn't there or, you know, doesn't believe in it. And you kind of sound crazy saying like, yeah, I saw like a light and it was like moving, or, you know, but I think that you did experience something. I think like to you it was real, and that's what it is like something that only you sort of can perceive, or if you're with a group of people, like a shared energy, you can perceive it. But I just think things come to us in shapes and forms that we don't fully understand, you know, like for example, I've had instances in the past where like, you know, people that I've known who like passed away, sometimes I felt their presence in the form of like sunlight or
Right.
like cloud or a rainbow or the ocean. And I think that has to do with the fact that like our energy sort of becomes everything. Like we are all one in a way. And that energy can be in any shape or form. And that fluidity is also very interesting. So the fact that you saw projection is like, I would say, you know, to someone who wasn't there, they would just be like, oh yeah, that wasn't a ghost, that was a projector. But I would say to you, it's like that actually manifested.
I completely agree with you. And I always say this to people when they go, oh my God, I've never had a psychic experience. I'm not a medium. I go, but what is it that you're expecting? What is your expectation of the supernatural? You know, if we all sit here and we wait for our great grandfather to whisper in our ear, none of us will be, you know, none of us will be. Yeah. But that's what I mean. I say sometimes spirit can communicate with you in your own voice, but it's something you would have never said or something you would have never thought. And you go, oh, that's not me.
Exactly.
I like that it's here.
Have your feelers out for it. You know, you just have to be sensitive to the environment around you, because odds are it's there. You just have to be spiritually in tune enough to perceive it.
Right. And I think it's interesting, like with circling back to Hampton Court, when I went to the bathroom and I tried to do Bloody Mary, I chickened out on the last one. So
it's so scary playing that game.
You will never know whether something would have come of it, or whether, I'm not saying she would have been like, holla, but I am saying, however, it could have made me feel a certain type of way, if you know what I mean. I could have experienced a sensation, but maybe it was because I was not receptive to the supernatural. I think I immediately went, nope, don't want it, return to sender, you know?
Exactly. And sometimes it's also vice versa, you know, sometimes you really like create that, and then the spirit itself is like, I'm not feeling it, I don't feel like socializing.
Who would want to come and sit down next to you if you were like, nope, don't want to see you, don't want to talk to you?
I feel like if I was like a phantom, you know, sort of like haunting like old, you know, like castles and boats and stuff like that, why would I just hang out with like random people who are like so desperate to
you? I love it.
Like, you know, some other ghost quest that I'm on right now.
You know, and it's like when people like talk to spirit really disrespectfully in films, like come on out if you can, like they're probably looking at you going, I don't want to talk to you.
They're like, I'm in a parallel dimension, like I'm here.
I love that. But what was I gonna say? We went on a little spirit kind of journey.
I love the journey.
I'm interested in how, do you recall how you first encountered something and you were like, oh, spirit?
Yeah, I'd have to think back. I think like my childhood house, like I always got the impression it was haunted or there's something there. It's pretty hard to put into words, but it was like kind of this feeling like sometimes you'd like turn a corner and like you'd see like a shadow move or something, or I would feel like I could see this like weird sort of like skeleton figure like just in this wine cellar that I had like downstairs. I would go there like sometimes late at night, so like because the computer room was like right next to it, so like go play like video games, and I was playing like Harry Potter and stuff, so like also that's probably, you know, inspired. But you know, sometimes I'd go upstairs and I'd like catch a glimpse of something like shiny or like something like a face, or like I can't tell if it was like my imagination, but whatever it was, like I felt like connected to something that was only in that house.
The thing is, I was gonna say, who's to say that spirit doesn't, I suppose, operate within our imagination or place things into our imagination for us to put the pieces together or for us to come about, you know?
It's like a puzzle that I feel like, it's like very much something that we have to solve on our own. I mean, like we have to like really, like as you said, like you can choose to sort of like ignore it and like go on with your life. But if you're in tune with it and you really want to know, I feel like you can dig like really deep. And who's to say if that puzzle is like presented to us or if it's our own puzzle? That's something that I wonder sometimes.
I find that interesting because I'm like, maybe you could be laying out things for me to encounter in different ways at different stages of my life, but I think the more we try and go, no, that was my idea, that wasn't your idea, and it couldn't possibly be, the less we will have fun with it, or the less we will explore it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's
When
just something we don't know.
no, I agree. It's just like whatever, just let it come to you somehow.
Exactly.
When do we decide that this energy is scary? Like, is there ever a point where you're like, right, I should be scared of this?
I think if I get the impression that it's malevolent or like trying to like cause harm in any way, but you know, I've seldomly felt that. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been afraid of things happening because it's like so unexpected and like random, and it just that's like why horror movies have jump scares. It's like not because you're necessarily like feeling this emotion. It's just like something like pops up and you're like, oh my God. So
the thing, it's such a love-hate thing. I can't look away, but at the same time, I don't want to look. For me,
yeah, exactly. It's like you're kind of peeking through your hands and through your fingers, like
you're looking, but I don't want to.
like are like really afraid. But yeah, I used to do this thing like where I would like sort of like sit under my covers, like if I heard something or felt something in my room. Like I remember once actually, because I used to have this acoustic guitar in my room, and I swear, like in the middle of the night, it just like strummed a chord, like in the dark. And it was like so weird because I was like, how did that even happen? I have no idea. And I think like I I don't know why I did this, but I would like go under my covers and I would like pretend that I was asleep, but I would actually be like watching and observing, and like I'd be like so intensely like trying to work out what happened. But like it's sort of like imagining like, okay, if there is something in my room, like it's gonna think I'm asleep, but I know it's there.
You're like tricking spirit, literally.
Yeah, like I always like wanted to like trick them so I could like actually see them if they were there.
See, I think that's so funny, like that trickster element. It feels like it comes through in your work as well, to be honest. Like that, now you see me, now you don't. Like, oh, my face is spinning. Like, do you know who I am? Like,
Yeah. I love playing with that, you know, this sort of like cheekiness. Because I think spirits are cheeky in general.
I agree, especially like when you hear about like poltergeist stories, like they're not all scary. Some of them are really funny. Like they might move your snacks. Like
pranking, they're honestly just pranksters. Oh my gosh, and that just made me think too, like when we went to the Queen Mary, like the most haunted thing we experienced like in the room B340 was that like when we got there we had like a bag of Doritos, and we were all like thinking about the Doritos. Like the second we like took it out, we were all like, we had the Doritos on our minds. Like I think it was almost like subconscious, but like it was there. And then we went out and we like walked around the boat and stuff. And we came back, the bag moved to like a different part of the room. And,
oh, you want these?
Yeah, none of us were like, all of us were asking like, who moved the Doritos? Like none of us did it. So, you know, if the ghost in that room did anything, it was just like move the chips around, you know.
I find that really funny. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's kind of harmless in a way. It's like, yeah, that's like that spirit has a good sense of humor.
That's the thing. I feel like sometimes we need to relearn the way we interact with spirit, or like what we expect of them, because to me it seems a little bit unfair to expect that they're just here to terrorize you. Like it's not.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like that's the thing what they say about, you know, bears, for example. They're more afraid of you than you are of them most of the time. So yeah, it's like I think, yeah, taking away the sort of like expectation that something's going to happen, or you know, in general, like sort of having a bias about these things only limits like your interactions with them.
I agree. I definitely agree. So I want to have a little chat now about the music. How do you come about these sounds? Like, how does it come together?
Yeah, I would say it's like something that I like almost harness or channel. Like it feels like it's beamed to me from somewhere. So usually I have to be in the right mood. Like I make things pretty much every day. Like I mean, I make music, but also like I like to draw. I like to make sculptures. I like to just create stuff in general. But yeah, I'd say like when that's at its peak is like when I feel like I'm not even the one who's responsible for making it. Like it's like sort of like I'm just the vessel and I'm just like the person that's been chosen to do this somehow. So whenever I'm sort of in that mood and I'm in front of my computer or my keyboards or my gear in general, like it's actually hard for me to say like how I made that, because I'm sort of like in a trance. Like I'm fully like entranced, like so locked in. I probably have some like ridiculous like expression on my face, just like
I can relate. I think we all do that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's kind of like hypnotizing. But I would say for the most part, it's a lot of like recycling audio, and it's a lot of like manipulating audio and kind of like playing with that as a medium.
Because I feel hypnotized, to be honest with you, and I just think it sounds as though you're channeling in some way. That's what I'm getting, and it's like sometimes I think, as you say, you can't really pinpoint the process, but it's being given to you, and I feel like that really feeds into the narrative. Like, had it been really considered what you were doing, would it be as authentic as it could be, or is this more authentic, would you say?
I think the more aware I am of it, the harder it is for me to continue.
Right.
Because it's like that thing, it's like, what is it? What's like driving me to do this right now? And then I start thinking about it and then I can't do it anymore. So it's almost like I just have to like lose myself in it. And I think that's a lot more fun. You know, in general, I think like sometimes I feel like when I'm making things and I'm taking myself too seriously, like I can't actually like get into that zone or into that place. But when I'm kind of just like, okay, I'm having fun, like it doesn't really matter where I go because it's just a journey, then I start to make the stuff that I'm really excited about. So yeah, I would say like my awareness of it, like honestly, like sort of makes it more inert. But like when I'm just entranced, it's like limitless.
I love that. And do you find more acceptance, maybe even as a person within the kind of supernatural or within the other? Like, do you consider yourself other in some way also?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I feel like I'm from like a different planet sometimes.
Love that.
Like, yeah, I'd say, you know, like my whole life, like I've been like, you know, socially speaking, sort of like I float from friend group to friend group and stuff. Like I've always managed to have like close relationships with friends and people in general. But like in general, I don't feel like I've ever felt specifically like to one group or like category. So that's definitely like pushed me to like find a voice for myself, like individually.
That makes a lot of sense, to be honest, with what you're kind of doing. I mean, it's playful. Like, there's no kind of element of resentment that I'm other. It's a very, to me, I see celebration of other.
Oh yeah,
Showing
100%
you just
celebration.
what other can be, which brings me to, I wanted to kind of touch on what you said earlier about like the LGBT community and everything, and how do they find inclusivity within this kind of supernatural work? Because I feel as though everything you have kind of seen before is less inclusive when it comes to supernatural. It's like girl runs here, girl dies. It's usually,
Oh yeah, it's all those like sort of stereotypes, so like
so
those
heteronormative. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. And I find those tropes like really boring, you know, just because it's so, I mean, first off, it's really played out. And second off, you know, people and things are so much more complicated. And, you know, we're all just conscious beings and we're all sensitive beings. And like, I think what's so amazing to me about like when I first embraced my queerness and I first embraced, you know, like I'm more than like what I've been told I am by the world, you know, like the world can't tell me who I am. Like that's up to me to decide. And I think that there's this magic of, you know, you are what you believe you are and who you believe you are, and no one can better paint that picture of it than yourself. And I think that's especially true in like the queer community, where like I feel like there's such an awareness, like people are so like in tune with their like their truth and their like true selves, and they can be so vulnerable and like embrace that vulnerability as like a power. And I find that really fascinating and beautiful, because I think that, you know, really who we are is so fluid, and that's like not really up to us to decide, but it's also up to us to portray. So there's just like this sort of catch 22 where it's like, you know, we are sort of like this consciousness, but we're also like this observer of ourselves. So I feel like it's like there's a part of yourself that's like this sort of like mystical, beautiful, inexplicable thing. And then there's a part of yourself that's like sort of what I would say the very human, like perceiving oneself kind of thing. And I think that part of the perceiving oneself, it's like that's where you really get to paint the picture of like who you are. And I've seen that happen a lot more in the queer community, because I think honestly, like humans are and people are magical beings. Like our souls, our spirits, like we're so fascinating. And like it's crazy to me that like people are just like, you know, they see someone walking on the street and they're like, oh, that person's like X gender or X race or X, like, you know, and they just kind of put them into a box without even knowing the person.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I mean, like we're all so interesting. Like sometimes I meet people who like I would, you know, mistakenly judge as, oh, that person's so normal. And then they will say something to me like that's like really crazy and like transhumanist. And I'll be like, oh wait, like this person's like a freak like me. Like we're all freaks here.
That's what I mean. And I think what I found really interesting is like it's sad at the same time, but I think a lot of people within the LGBT community, a lot of queer people, feel like they've lost some sense of innocence in growing up because they were always forced to explain themselves
Yeah.
incessantly, like explain who you are. And I think that defeats the object of being a child and just being able to be so fluid. So I think
Yeah.
perhaps within the playfulness of your video, they could find some kind of resonance or get to experience that childlike wonder again that was taken, which is what I find quite interesting. I don't know how you resonate with that.
Oh, absolutely. I resonate with that very deeply. Childhood is a theme that I've like explored in my work a lot. I think at this point I've like kind of reached my like second adolescence, like if you will. Like I feel like because like as a child, like I felt like so in that innocence, like just so much understanding of myself. It's like I didn't judge myself about like silly small things. But
Mm-hmm.
then like going into adolescence suddenly I started becoming a lot more critical of myself, you know, because it kind of goes back to this thing we were talking about of like expectation, you know, sort of like how can you expect sort of like a magical being to be a certain way when like you can't really expect anything of magic, and you should just
Right.
embrace and like play with it and, you know, enjoy that beauty that's there. But like, yeah, going into adolescence is very much like things get put into a box, you get put into a box, and you know, like that really like screws up the way you like see yourself, because like identity is so interesting in the way that like, you know, there's so many layers to it. Like we perceive ourselves, like that's one level of identity. Then there's like how, you know, your family and your friends perceive you, and then there's like how the world perceives you, and so on. And yeah, I just think like, you know, in sort of like childhood, you don't really like care about that.
Yeah.
You kind of, you just are like, you just think like adults are like weird or like, you know, like, what's up with them, you know. Yeah, I'd say like embracing that innocence and that sort of like inner child, you know, because like I think at our core throughout our whole lives, like our inner child, like fundamentally like who we are, the building blocks of who we are is always there. So I think when you get to access that, you have a lot more freedom of like, you know, who you are. And, you know, also like there's so many like constraints and limits that are then taken away, because children like, you know, feel this like freedom to embrace anything. You know, they can get inside a cardboard box and then they're in like a flying saucer, you know, or they're in a different dimension.
Mhm.
And to say that we can't do that, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
we're only not kids because we say we're not.
Right. And it's just,
Yeah,
it's not wrong to a kid until you tell them it's wrong, and then it's intrinsically wrong. And it's like,
yeah, exactly.
like, so I think it's interesting how much liberty there is in this. Like you have a box that's opening, not closing, and it's drawing you in to a door. Like it's like
Literally.
you've literally like blown up our whole concept of like being in a box and be like, it's a box, but it's a gate, but it's open.
Exactly.
It's
And then
liberating.
like also I feel like that's like sort of what I am. Like in a way, it's like, you know, I'm just like a person, like a body with a spirit, with a consciousness, and inside that there's a whole portal and there's a whole galaxy. And I think it's like also real in the natural world. Like for example, like whenever you see those like sort of microscopic videos, like zooming in on something so much, like it starts to look like it's turning into like a little fractal, and then that kind of looks like a galaxy. And I just think it's so interesting, like when you zoom into something infinitely, it almost looks the same as like zooming out of something infinitely.
I completely agree with that, to be honest. I'm just literally visualizing it as you said it. It's like there's so much to be seen when you look at something from a different angle. And I think completely obliterating the concept of a box and drawing people in is a completely new concept in my opinion, to be
That's
honest with
cool.
you. I
Yeah.
think when you think of boxes, boxes are kind of synonymous of like closing the lid on you. You're in there, you're staying there, you're captive. But it's interesting. I feel like how the doors open up and it feels very open-hearted in a sense. I feel as though, you know, when you see those scenes in really cheesy films where like the person's like opening their heart and it's like a ray of light kind of coming out.
Cartoons as well, like that sort of
like it's very much like Beauty and the Beast, when like the beast just suddenly like just jumps up from the dead and it's like
that openness is something that I would consider like that's what the light is, you know, like even in this clip that's like flying in the background behind me right now, like you can see it's like going into the light is like what's inside, like there's like a light inside of all of us. So by being open-hearted and open-minded, like we're just letting our light out, you know, by not judging, by not putting limits on things.
See, I keep flicking between looking at your screen and my screen because they're happening at different times and I'm catching
I'm enjoying these intervals.
It's so much fun. I feel like every video now has to be like this. I do.
That's what's up.
No, I'm so glad. But I think I just think what's so interesting is like that polarity between the darkness and the light. And I think in talking to you, that I think whoever ends up watching this will see that there is so much to this work, and it's not just kind of gothic or morose, or you know what I mean, like very dark. There's so much going on here emotionally as well.
Like the aesthetics, I feel like that is just something to enhance the sort of like accessibility of the experience, you know, because like my personal like aesthetic preference would lean, you know, toward like gothic or, you know, sort of like, you know, that sort of style. But at its core, it's really just telling a story about mortality. It's a story about fear of death. It's a story about love, about friendships, about what family actually is.
Right.
And you know, all of the other components, the aesthetic components, are just for you to like enjoy that.
See, I love that. I just think it's so much more than what meets the eye, and that is literally the crux of what being supernatural is, or being involved in the supernatural is. You can't just go, right, it's that one thing. I think you are kind of unveiling so much about the work that nobody would have even considered, to be honest with you, because I think there will be people that look at it from purely an aesthetic lens and appreciate it in that sense, and then there will be another group of people that can do that but also go, right, okay, I wonder what's actually going on here, I wonder why.
Exactly. You know? Yeah, I feel like it's very much like, because I'm someone who likes to look deeper at things, you know, like I can like stare at a leaf for a while and then I'll start to notice like it has veins, and I'll start to notice like the colors of the veins, you know, and things like that. And I feel that way about a lot of things, you know, about music in general, music that I enjoy. Usually it's somewhat avant-garde, experimental, like not an easy listen, but there's so much on so many levels, there's so much for me to appreciate. And I feel like that's true of like all things in life. Like there's so many levels of different things to appreciate. So yeah, that's really like gratifying for me to hear, because like I would like people to look deeper if they want, and I'd like people to appreciate it on different levels. Like if someone just wants to like enjoy it as a sort of aesthetic novelty, I think that's cool. But if someone also wants to like go in and come up with like sort of a theory behind the story, you know, and like really go off, I'm also into that. So yeah, I just want people to have their own sort of relationship to it and their own interpretation.
With something so conceptual, I think it would be, like you say, really gratifying to hear all of these spin-offs of what's going on. Like it doesn't necessarily, like truth doesn't necessarily matter, basically. Like
and it's like I feel like truth is so also subjective. It's just so like what we believe is the truth. You know? And there's so many ways of proving and disproving it. So yeah, when it comes to things that are like so otherworldly, I feel like let's just have fun with that.
I love that. I agree, to be honest with you. I feel like that's what it's all about. And I think when you have fun with it, we can release judgment. And when we can release judgment, more people can encounter this without going, nah.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but
exactly. And usually when I find like that someone, you know, does have sort of judgment, or like, you know, I think, and it is human, I think, to make judgments about things in general, like but I would just say that usually any sort of like opinion of anything usually has more to do with like the person than like the thing itself, I find.
Their projection onto the thing. No, I agree. I think it's okay to have judgment, but like, what is the tone of your judgment? Are you judging from, I don't know, observing, going, oh, I see this, and I see that. That's a judgment in a way, but then another judgment is that's weird and it doesn't make sense and it's childish and it's, you know what I mean?
That's like dismissing it
The
because
tone
of
of the judgment matters.
like like thing that's inhibiting them that they maybe find negative, and they don't want to look at it because like they know like, okay, this is something that I've put away. I don't want to unearth that. I'm not ready.
I find that the more you try and put it away, the more it resurfaces though.
Oh, it's true.
But let's circle back to astral projection.
Definitely.
Do you have an astral projection kind of experience that you could share with us at all?
Yeah, of course. I would say like most of the time that I've experienced astral projection has been because of like a sort of lucid dream experience, or I'd say a lot of it stems from my own experience of like sleep paralysis, which I've had since I was a child. I think it's actually become a lot less rampant now. Like I haven't really had sleep paralysis in like a few months. But when I do have it, it's usually pretty intense, and I'm like super cosmically aware of that. And most of the time, I mean, it's like true to its name. Like I can't move. There's some object or like something around me that's moving, and I feel this like intense pressure on my chest or pressure on my body, and I almost feel like I'm in some kind of vacuum. Like I'm like flying, like I'm just like being like sucked into something. And I can feel this rush in my head, like this, like almost like, you know, when you go down on a roller coaster, how that feels. Like it's sort of similar to me when I'm having sleep paralysis. It's like something's happening. I'm like going into something. And usually what that is like some kind of very like specific like dream or like memory.
Right. I think that it's so crazy that you're talking about the sleep paralysis. I always encountered something really heavy on me too. And I think it changed the way I slept. I don't know about you. Did you ever try and break out of it? Because I've heard that if you kind of try and clench your hands like this, you can bring yourself out. And
that's one method. Another method that works for me as well. I remember ever since I like found out about it, I tell all my friends who have sleep paralysis, is like you can actually control your breathing in your sleep. It's like one of the only things you can control. Like your finger movements, I think is definitely another one. But like you can like kind of change your breathing from regular to irregular breathing and then sort of come out of that. But I find like waking up from like those sleep paralysis experiences as intense as like going into them. Like usually you're like gasping for air and you're like covered in sweat and it's like bright or something. And you're just like, what is happening?
It's crazy. Like the first time it happened, I felt like I was fighting for my life. Like I wish I was exaggerating, but it's because I've never felt anything like it. And I thought, am I dead? Like, is this death? Like
maybe that's as close to death as like we can get, or like one of the levels. I really wonder,
Because
crazy. Also like because you were saying about like that pressure on your chest, there's like a painting, I can't remember the artist exactly, but it's a very famous painting if you look it up, about sleep paralysis. And like in the painting there's like literally the artist depicted like a demon sitting on someone's chest.
I think I've seen that. This is the thing. I had a friend and she would see things, like there would be really terrifying things like on her, shaking her. But for me, I felt like I knew I was conscious. Like I was talking to myself going, oh my God, like how do I get out of this? Like I was up here awake, but the body was not. And I couldn't comprehend what was on me and why it was so heavy. I thought thank anything. I was gonna say thank God, but thank whatever that I couldn't see, just in case. But I think it was like I knew it was happening. I was like, oh my God, I'm having this again. How do I get out? And I was very focused on regaining control over the body.
It's interesting. Because I find like for me it oscillates like depending on like the level of intensity of the sleep paralysis experience. Either I'm like, okay, like I want to get out of this, like I'm going to change my breathing, or I'll try a technique like the hands. But otherwise, like I think, oh, I'm actually going to go into this, because if I am consciously aware and I can get through this initial freakiness of sleep paralysis, that means I can astral project. And like then I almost do that like intentionally. And it's kind of super rare actually. I've
Yeah.
had like a handful of experiences where I like actually got to like astral project and then like have this really insane like lucid dream where I could like fly, or you know, I could go into space, or like I had a really fun one where I could like jump super high like above like the ozone layer, and like it was just like it was like bouncy.
I
I could
love
just So yeah, sometimes I want to go into it, but other times I'm like, this initial thing is just too demonic, and like I have to get out of this.
I think when it's like, are you ready for it in some way? I think if I mean, touch wood, I don't, because I really could do without. But if it were to happen again, knowing what I know now, or being interested in what I am now, I might try and relax into it like yourself.
Yeah.
I think at that, I didn't see the opportunity in it. I saw it as more of an inconvenience that I couldn't control something in me. So maybe that was a lesson for me to relinquish control in some way.
But that's also, I think, very important in some ways, because like a lot of the times like I feel like I'm going into sleep paralysis. Usually my mind is occupied by some kind of stress, or some kind of like deep vulnerable feeling about myself that I haven't quite like unlocked or addressed yet, you know.
Yeah.
Like I think like insecurity for a lot of people is like they're worried of like sort of admitting it or talking about it because they don't want to be judged. But like when you actually like talk about it, it's usually met with like so much support and like understanding and sharing experience. And when I'm going to sleep paralysis and stuff, I think I'm usually like occupied by things like that. And getting through it is kind of maybe in a sense subconsciously freeing myself of those things, like admitting, okay, that's what I'm feeling, and then the pressure is lifted, and then I kind of like get to lucid dream or like astral project.
I think I agree with you, and I think in a sense, coming out of sleep paralysis was a deep sense of surrender. It's very humbling or vulnerable in a way that you're coming back to something so simple, like okay, the fingers, okay, the breath, like you say, like just stripping all of those things away. So in a sense, if you were to think about it as spirit, maybe you are being guided away from those really difficult things, or being right, if you're not going to release them in a somewhat of a healthy way, we're going to strip you back to your fundamentals,
Exactly.
ground you whether you like it or not, basically.
Yeah, I think that our mind is so powerful. Like it has a way of telling us, like even things that we don't like perceive on a surface level are affecting us. And then it starts to even affect us like physically with this like sensation of like some kind of pressure. Like I think like, our minds have more power than we even sometimes give them credit for.
It's insane, isn't it? The pressure is insane because you can't even explain
No,
how,
it's hard to put into words.
like you say, it literally is a vacuum. I couldn't think of a better word, because when people ask you, oh, so what's it like, I can never figure out quite what it is, but it's almost like you're being dragged into the core of your mattress.
I feel like it's happening like so fast. It's like my body is just like flying, like it's like as if I was like got thrown out of an airplane or something.
Crazy. I want to get to portals. Let's
Definitely.
talk about, okay, so what would your portal be like if you could have one? What would people experience, see, feel, smell, like whatever?
You know, I feel like for me, I'm really inspired by there's this one like classic Walt Disney cartoon, and it's called Through the Mirror. And
Ooh.
it's a Mickey Mouse cartoon where it's actually like pretty close to lucid dreaming and astral projection in itself.
Right.
Like it shows Mickey Mouse sort of like falling asleep in a house, and then you know he wakes up and he like sees this like beautiful mirror and like reaches through it, and then like can sort of feel it almost as if it's like a gooey sort of like, you know, when glass turns into goo kind of.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean.
Kind of
See it,
like rubbery, and Mickey Mouse like reaches through it and then like goes
see it now,
into
yeah.
the mirror, which is like where Mickey Mouse was when he fell asleep. But like in this new world, all these inanimate objects have come to life. So there's like this dancing lamp, or like, you know, basically everything is alive.
Ooh.
And I feel like my portal would be somewhat similar, because I honestly think that it's real in a sense. Like sometimes like people say that when one mirror faces another mirror, it creates something called like a vortex.
Yeah.
And it's like, because it's like sort of this level of reflection is sort of like infinite, that's a place where like a lot of spirits exist. So I feel like my portal would literally be a mirror, because I want to like go into myself and like find all these things inside myself, and also discover the energy in every object and everything around me that is alive. So it maybe be like a sort of parallel world that looks and feels a lot like ours, but the sense of perception and interaction is so much higher.
And in a way, it also, I think it's a very dignified kind of space you're trying to create, that we give these objects voice, that we give
Yeah.
people, yeah. It's, I think I was obsessed with Fantasia, or is that how you say it? I love
Yeah, I like Fantasia too. That sounds very chic.
It's I think it's interesting, like you say, at its core, that is so it's very sacred, to be honest with you. I mean, we get caught up in these cool like sci-fi, like high-tech images, but at the crux, this is literally meditative, that you're allowing everything to have a voice and everything to have a place and a say.
Yeah, exactly. Everything has agency.
That's what I mean. I think agency was a word I was playing with a lot recently, thinking, how do we give the supernatural agency? Like, what does it take to do so? Or like, how can we lend it a voice?
Yeah, I would say in a sense, like, because we're like our minds and our energy is so powerful. I mean, we're a beacon of energy transference. Like in a sense, I'd like to think that every person or living thing, or even, yeah, trees, for example, are sort of like nodes for energy transference. And I don't think we're always aware like how our energies like affect other things. It's like the sort of butterfly effect ripple, like one action or emotion can sort of set off a sequence of events. Or even like when you have a certain like type of relationship with an object, for example, like if you have like a teddy bear that's really like important to you and special to you, if someone else were to hold it, they could probably feel like a good energy. But like, for example, like once I like had this like weird sort of paranormal experience where like my phone connected to like the Bluetooth audio of like my friend's car, and it was playing like a conversation we had like 10 minutes before, and it was like just really scary. And my friend like turned to me and was like, "Your phone is haunted." And I was like, "You're right. And my phone probably is haunted," because I just think about the kinds of like energies that go into objects, you know? It's like,
So yeah, in a sense,
so
nothing
different.
is nothing's inanimate, if you know what I mean. It's just, are you watching it animate? Like, how does it animate? You know?
Yeah. We bring things to life just like through the power of perception. I mean, because I guess we are alive, and that is our superpower, that is our magic. And yeah, anything that we sort of interact with is as alive as we are.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. I think that is really the case, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. And I think what we, like I say, what we're getting here is like this very dignified approach to bringing spirit through, and this very, you know, it's all encompassing, like everything is being respected, which is so much more than I guess what meets the eye when you see these kind of aesthetics. Like I say, there's just so much more to your practice, which is amazing. But is
Yeah.
there anything else you feel like you want to tell us about the work that we haven't touched on, or just anything you want to share at all?
Yeah. Well, I guess like in a sense, I'd like to say that I think that in a way, life itself is just so, this is going to sound like a little bit like, rose colored glasses, but, life is really a gift, and it's such an amazing thing that we can even perceive this reality and perceive this world. And I think that there's just endless sort of creative potential in the fact that we are conscious. And I think that, a lot of people put pressure on making art, put pressure on making things. And in a way that can sort of like hold you back sometimes, because I think just through the sheer act of living is like sort of an act of art. They say like life imitates art and art imitates life, and I think it's certainly true. And most of the things that I create or that I'm talking about come from firsthand, like my experiences of living life. Like this mixtape that I have coming out, Hollywood Forever mixtape, is named after the graveyard in Hollywood that I visited when I was in LA last year. So, it's sort of like all I'm doing is documenting, or like sort of writing a diary about what I've experienced. And I just feel like, for myself too, this is kind of the advice I would give to myself, is like not to overthink it and just to like live and to capture that, because just through doing that without having any expectation or pressure, you will see something that you didn't even realize was there. So yeah, that's sort of, I think, a thought that I had that I wanted to share.
I love that. I love that. I think it's amazing to be so receptive to everything, I guess, and to redefine our role as an artist. And sometimes we are a vessel, sometimes we are a reporter or a recorder of something, if you know what I mean, as
Yeah,
opposed to someone
exactly.
that must create something completely original and of my own accord. You're missing out on some very important stimulus that you could draw on instead, as well.
Yeah, it's so true.
I
I
love
mean,
it.
like, exactly. Like, for example, have you ever like had an experience where like you were in an environment where you were going to record something, for example, or like record a video, and before you record, you do whatever it is you're recording, you do it perfectly. So you like play a song or you say something or you do something, then you hit record and suddenly you're making all these mistakes
Yeah,
because you're aware of the fact that like you're recording.
that's
So
what
like,
I mean.
yeah, I want to like sort of bring down that wall between like this is being captured and like this is how it is. Or maybe just, yeah, always like have the record button on, like record everything. Like
It's
I record a
amazing
lot
that
of
you
sounds and stuff, like from everyday life. I use like my iPhone like voice memo app, and I just like record like whatever, and I end up using it half the time.
does that kind of low tech in comparison to like something like really state of the arts recording take away the pressure for you in some way to
Yeah,
a certain way?
I guess, yeah, it's like maybe a different mode.
Yeah,
Sometimes like either it's like if I'm improvising, I think I'd prefer like not to have too much of an awareness of things and just get to like really play and be in that zone. But like let's say I have like a really like thought out executed idea. For example, the video. Like so making the song for me was like a process of just like letting myself go and like just having record on all the time, just jamming, like not having any expectation of outcome.
mm-hmm.
And then when it came to, okay, so I wrote lyrics. I want to record those lyrics, then like I have something very specific to bring to the table. And that's when I would bring it into a sort of recording environment, or like the video, for example, like we had the script and then we brought it into the sort of state of the art, context. So I think, yeah, when it comes to actually like dreaming up the concept itself, it's good to like sort of not have that awareness. But then when you have
Yeah,
this idea, then it's like you can sort of shift to, okay, I'm gonna like execute this in a very like, you know, full way, like the full package.
right. So it's like you've given yourself space to breathe
Yeah.
without there being an expectation of you to do something, and then the work sort of comes together. It's not like, right, I'm an artist and this is what I'm doing. I'm actively making work. It's very kind of fluid in a way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like sometimes I have that like awareness, like of like, oh, I'm a musician, like I have to make good music. And then I just start doubting myself like so much. But then when I just like let go of that and I'm just like, oh, you know what? Like I have just so much energy inside of me, and like whatever I record, that's gonna be like my energy. And then when I don't think about it, then I'm like, oh wow, like that's something that I'm actually like quite impressed by.
Yeah,
So yeah, it depends. I think it's like when I think what the truth is like our awareness of our own ego is like the only thing that holds us back. The rest is
right.
just like endless.
As my friend says, the mystery is not your business.
Exactly. The mystery is not your business. That's such a good quote.
Literally, I was thinking about that because it releases you
It
so
does.
much from having to go right this, that, and the other. Like one of the things that's been so difficult in art school over the last 4 years is to sit back, not justifying your practice, to let it just be. It's really difficult but liberating because people will have opinions of it. It's not going to touch everyone. It's not going to resonate with everyone, or it will resonate loads. And I think what we're doing as creators is having to surrender that and go, right, okay, I put it
Yeah.
out there. For me, it might have felt this, but for you, it could feel something else. And I have to be okay with that.
Yeah. And I mean also people have been like wrong in the past. So there's no reason they wouldn't be, wrong again. Like if you think about, for example, a very obvious example like Van Gogh. Like, no one recognized Van Gogh as like like the superstar artist. And then, after his death only was that sort of realized and recognized. And the only reason that we can still recognize that is because he didn't quit, and it's like there are so many things in this world, that people's opinions, what people write on the internet, whatever. To be an artist, I think it does take a pretty thick skin, because the more you put yourself out there, the more you'll be met with love and with criticism. And usually, 99, almost 100% of the time, love will outweigh the criticism, but you just have to be strong enough to shift your focus to the positive instead of the negative. And if you just continue going and you persevere, you'll get to where you want to go. But you just have to remember your journey, and you have to remember what it is you're actually after, and not lose yourself in what people think or say or anything like that.
I think it's so interesting that you say that and that you bring up the Van Gogh thing. I think there is a very famous British playwright, John Keats, and he, I don't know, are you familiar? Just so I can...
Yeah, vaguely. I have some background in theater, but maybe refresh me a little bit.
So essentially, he referred to death as life's high mead. So he wasn't being recognized in life as a master of his trade. So he would romanticize and really, I guess, in some ways, maybe fetishize the idea of being dead and then being revered because you're dead. And then it did manifest only when he died. Did his romantic work become wow, he's a master, you know what I mean? So it's that bittersweet, where you don't experience the magic of life in the process, and then only when you're dead does your work get appreciated, or only when you're gone. And I think
exactly, yeah, and there's something about that that's so tragic. You know what I mean? It's because if you're so busy your entire life wishing for something that isn't your current life, then you're missing out, and then if that only happens after, then you won't get to enjoy it. So I feel the point is just enjoy it, because whatever this moment is now, this is the moment. We spend so much of our time sort of wishing the moment away, and we're we want things to be different. We want to live our ideal life.
Yeah, I agree.
But to get there, we have to start here. And in this moment, in this present second, anything is attainable. You just have to really realize what it is.
Right. See, I think there is a serious lesson in this chat.
Yeah, for me as well. Half the time I'm sort of thinking I need to write this down and put it on my wall.
Transcribe this.
Yeah.
No, this has been so amazing. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure. I'm making a heart. If you can't see. Yeah, it's a heart.
I'm attempting it. This has been Dasychira. Thank you so much for joining us here.
It's been a cosmic pleasure, and I'm so glad to be a part of this experience with all of you.